So, David or David?
Doesn't matter.
David. David, thank you for accepting me to talk to you. I was one of the guys who was arrested in Sofia after one of the sculptures remembering the communist regime in Bulgaria was painted overnight. So I read your replies to an interview to a lady from Novinite.com, Maria. She sends you greetings. Thank you for the support and for the kind words, protecting our being arrested. And thank you for, accepting this, to give this interview. So I would like to talk to you a little bit about the communist regime, about the art and graffiti, and about your works, most popular works of yours. So let's start. I will quote one of your interviews some time ago. You said that nowadays Europe should laugh more at itself. What do you mean? What should the Europeans laugh at while looking themselves in the mirror? Czechs, for example, or other nations like Bulgarians, if you know more about Bulgaria, etc.
I hope that Europe will have a kind of chance not to take itself so seriously. This is probably what the laughing about Europe should be. And at certain points, it looks like there are some exceptions, which, if you look, that the French are able to do fun with themselves, and Brits are able to do fun with themselves. I'm not sure if we can do it or whatever.
When you say you mean Czechs?
I mean the Czechs, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what about political correctness and arts? Does the artist should be politically correct? And what does it mean in the terms of making art, especially art which is critical to a system, critical to a society, critical to political class?
So it's not about art, it's about the culture workers or the field which is called creativity. I think that anybody who does exist in the field of creativity should express his or her thoughts. What the creativity is about expressing yourself. So if you want to express yourself, you probably have the right to express yourself, unless you will be, of course, hurting somebody else. That's the way. So the freedom is about my idea of a freedom is do whatever you want, unless you hurt somebody else. And this is it.
Can you recall, do you want to speak about some things you did which provoke nations? Did you do something which provokes Czechs, for example? Do you think you are able to do such a piece of art which could provoke everybody at once?
No, and I hate. I hate when somebody's telling me that I'm, the thing is that having this mark, okay, this is the artist provocative bullshit.
It's a bullshit.
I hate it. No, it's like, it's you have the mark, and I don't want to use that.
Okay.
So it's the interpretation, and I don't think that I said. Maybe a couple of times, but those marks, like why? No, I'm expressing myself. So if I'm expressing myself, that's about what we talked about in the beginning. So the freedom of expression is the freedom of expression.
Then I apologize for probably insulting you with such questions.
No, well, that's sort of the media's interpretation.
Actually, I'm doing this interview solely for my blog, and I appreciate that you accepted. Then I will shift the conversation towards communism and communist regime. I am aware that in Czech Republic there is a popular phrase which says, I have a note here, "S komunisty nemluvím," What
It's
is the
not a
meaning?
popular phrase, it's the phrase which we, with a bunch of friends of mine, made it as the kind of like a movement, or not a movement, not organization, I don't know, a bunch of friends, we just decided that
Informal group of people.
about 12 or 13 years ago, it's a really long time ago, before the elections, when the Communist Party began to raising enormous positive response on the public pool, we decided that we should do something with it, because it was 10 years after the end of the communism, and we saw that having a communism, not regime, communist party, such huge preferences, we thought that we should do something about it, and that's it. So we decided to do that activity, and we formed that, and we did a couple of actions like concert and some public exhibitions and things like that. So it was sort of like a little movement, which finally ended up that the whole thing was kind of like accepted by even a government, and one of the government party, the right-wing government party, sort of adopted as one of the phrase, like we should probably, use it for the
It's a slogan, political slogan. Okay, then next question.
And that was it. So.
If I'm not wrong, your appreciation of the communist regime is more to say negative than positive. But
Definitely
isn't it one of the popular world ideologies? What makes you be so negative or so critical towards?
I lived in it for 21 years, and I know for sure that the regime is dirty, that the regime is not working, and the whole ideology is based on criminal act or activity.
What's the overall appreciation and evaluation of the? Can you generalize? Can you speak about Czech people in general? How do they appreciate? What's their opinion, or you don't feel comfortable generalizing in such a way?
Generalizing what this nation means? Well, it's lazy.
No, I mean about the communist regime, especially.
About the communist regime?
Yeah.
That was criminal regime which was dragged here from Russia, and this is it. And of course, the way it was kept here was by the pressure of the Russian army. Because if you look at the '68, in '68 it looked like that the communists will be over, and then the not only Russian army came. So that was it.
Actually, this was one of the reasons a group of people which are not known in Bulgaria yet, they painted the Bulgarian monument of Soviet Army, and they wrote under it Bulgarskuse Omlova, yes. What's your response to that? Did you accept it? Is it a kind of vandalism, or what's your personal interpretation on this act?
In certain ways, I've never seen, of course, this monument. According what I saw, it looks like one of the typical Bolshevism. It's not a sculpture. It's ideology used in different depicting. So it's even very hard for me to take it as an art. So talking about vandalism, I think that in the first moment it was the vandalism that the Russian army probably asked to build this monument, and that's it.
Yeah, actually we are getting into deep historical waters of Bulgarian history, and I tend to agree with you that it's a kind of, attempt to dominate over Bulgarian culture, history, etc. But then we come back to Czech. Your act when you painted the Soviet monument army
that
here in
the
pink, same thing. what was the history? You were arrested, as far as I know. Then a few politicians responded, protecting you.
I was not actually in prison. I was searched, and then I supposed to be persecuted. And then when the MP painted the tank,
was it one or a group of MPs?
About 20.
20.
Hopefully we will meet one of the guys. So they painted on the pink again, and then that was it. So I think that I probably was prosecuted to pay some fine.
Fine.
And that was it.
Okay. And then we come back to your last work, which is clearly anti-communist oriented. So say the middle finger you gave to Mr. President Zeman. Then you said that you did this because he aids the communists, helps the communists. What do you mean by that?
His party, which he was supporting massively, and the party is crazy because the party is called by him. You know, his name is Zeman, and the party is called Zemanovci. So, and he was massively supporting them. What happened during this summer? The government failed and was decomposed, and the parliament was dissolved, and then he nominated and named a new government by his fellows, seriously by the guys who were supporting him in the presidential election, and also during the whatever. So he basically named supporters, and one guy who was in charge of Czech branch of Lukoil is sort of like a gray eminence.
I read one interview of yours, and you're recalling your students' years in New York, while in New York, and then you explained that you got a scholarship by George Soros Foundation, which helped you, paying your study there and your stay in New York.
I was not studying there. No, I didn't study there.
Stayed there for quite some time, yeah. So my question is, if you give the same middle finger to Bulgarian socialists, they will use most probably a word which is offensive. They call all the people who are working in the non-governmental field Sorosoids, which is a kind of offensive way to say that they are being funded by such foreign foundations. It's a little bit deep waters, but my point is, if you do the same thing in Bulgaria, you will most likely be accused of being foreign agent, which works against the Bulgarian interests, etc. How relevant such accusations are in a European country like Czech Republic?
Thanks God, this sounds to me like past in the communism. Nothing I can add.
Okay. And maybe last question in this field of communist monuments and communist symbols in the countries, post-communist countries like Bulgaria, like Czech, like all this Soviet bloc.
It's all the look at the North Korea, look at probably even China with all the monuments. The monuments works like the symbol, non-speakable symbol of the regime and supporter or whatever.
My question was rather, where do you think is the proper place of such monuments, such sculptures, which clearly...
In the history.
In history.
Yeah.
But physically.
Forgotten in the history. No, forgotten in history.
Forgotten in the history. That may mean even physically disappearing.
That would be the best. Yeah.
That would be the best. Okay. Graffiti and painting. Is graffiti on the streets a vandalism?
Yes, if somebody going on the Charles Bridge and painting or spraying on the Charles Bridge, it's the vandalism. Yeah.
Then political graffiti like Banksy in Great Britain, for example, can that be named vandalism? Political graffiti?
Banksy does not exist.
Does not exist? Well,
no,
somebody's science.
It's a bunch of people.
Bunch of people. Yeah. That's your... Okay. Then we go further. Well, I can't jump over that question. Painting sculptures, symbols of the communist regime, is this an art, or it's a kind of political protest, or that's a pure vandalism?
Well, it depends on consequences. Well, everything depends on consequences.
Then what consequences may constitute such act as an art, as a protest, or as a...
As a protest, anything. As a protest, that's a protest. As an art, this depends on the future and history, and because nobody knows if it's art or not. No, I don't know if those paintings are art or not. This will be probably find out on the future.
Okay, then.
And then,
sorry.
so and the protest, yes, as a protest, it's like if you have a transparent, if you use graffiti, whatever, it's the protest. So if somebody's writing a sign, we were probably writing signs, stop communism, 25 years ago.
You're an artist.
But it wasn't an art, it was the protest. It was.
I see. My question is, you're an artist and you also do sculptures. If you say, this sculpture, I don't accept it as an art, I want it to be removed, destroyed, or whatever, is this more important to the society, or the fact that a certain group of members of that society say this sculpture should stay on the place it was created? You mean your opinion against our opinion, which is as a creator of the art?
You cannot distinguish that. Which way would you do it? It's the first time it's property. It's property of somebody.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of the owner of the property, you ultimately can say somebody's doing something with it, is doing a crime. So it really depends on like zillion other aspects.
But I speak in the context of communist symbols. For example, you were...
Unfortunately, even the communist symbols belong to somebody. Unfortunately.
To the society, to the state, to the municipality.
To the state, yeah, okay. So if the state will decide it, remove it, then it's perfect. And of course, state, but the state are concrete people. If the concrete people decided, let's remove that, then it's better to remove it, I guess.
So you say that public opinion is important in that sense?
Of course, public opinion, and public opinion is the same opinion as the voters. Like that's the way. And of course, in a certain moment, you will reach the moment when the society might be idiotic enough to be willing to keep bad things, and maybe realize later that it's not anyhow valuable, or the other way around. You never know, and then that's the problem. That's what we have to sort of face. That's about the unperfectionalism of the human being.
And the same point of your stay in New York. I remember in the same interview you said something about hypocrisy in the society, but that's not the point. My question is there any object on the streets of New York, of America, which you wouldn't mind to paint pink? Statue of Liberty or something?
Well, especially in New York, everything belongs to somebody.
You have troubles.
No, it's somebody else's property, and mostly. So, and that's a bit, I would say, even different. First thing. Second, all the things which were built in states, in my opinion, were built under democratic regime, not under dictatorship.
I see.
So it's really difficult to, using or comparing things like that. But of course, there are a lot of very ugly sculptures.
Okay, and maybe the last question, and then I leave you in peace. An artist. Is it okay for an artist to have an outspoken, clear, loud political position? or it's a kind of propaganda. If you're a popular artist and at the same time you propagate this or that political agenda.
That's the freedom of expression of everybody. Why you would say that the artist cannot say something about? It's the freedom of speech. It's the freedom of expression, and the freedom of expression has to be kept, even for artists, I would say.
So if politician has the right to evaluate a piece of art, then an artist should be able to evaluate politicians' work.
Of course. That's the freedom of the speech, and that's the base of the democracy, in my opinion. So that's the point. And like, yes, of course, you can criticize the politicians.
That's the last point. A friend of mine who helped me coming here and driving me back and forth in Prague. I remember. I heard that you spoke about political situation in Bulgaria. If you don't want to answer, don't answer. But if you have something to say, please. Okay. Do you support? What's your opinion about the protests? About all the things which go on? From the perspective you got from this 5 or 10 minutes talking to a friend of mine.
From that perspective, it's not fair to judging. Mm-hmm. If I would be more familiar, I know a tiny chips of what's going there, and I heard that it's not good in this moment. I probably know a bit more about what's going on in Germany. I probably know a bit more what's going on in maybe Austria, but
not in Bulgaria.
And I would not be able to making a comments even about Germany in this moment.
I see.
So we talked about it, but it's yes, of course it's bad, but it's like common situation. It's like if you look at the Belarus, I probably heard more about Belarus, what's going on there, because a couple of friends. So, yes, of course, unfortunately, further east of post-communist regimes in Europe, there are more and more problems. And we seriously faced a moment which I feared quite a lot, that the parliament system will be overwhelmed by the power of our president. And thanks God it did not happen. But we seriously had a chance that we would end up with 120 votes for him. Mm-hmm. And it did not happen. So there are always moments when you have the voters have to decide it, and then it depends on the voters, and it depends on what I realized in my life in the end of the 90, when the communist regime ended. I thought, okay, so we need something like 10 years to recover after those 40 years. Mm-hmm. After 15 years I realized, well, it probably won't be 15 years, we probably need a bit more, let's say 20. Now I know that it's more than twice what destroyed the country. So it's definitely more than 40 years to get into or to level with regular democracies like Austria, Germany, whatever, mm-hmm. Britain. And it's like, this fight between Achilles and Achilles, the race between Achilles and
Alcibiades is yeah.
You know what is it?
Yeah, we all forgot the name.
Yeah, and you know what this thing is about, because
Medusa?
Not Medusa. No, Achilles and what is it?
Blank. I'm blank. Okay, it will come up later.
Yeah. Because
we all know the story.
So the story is that if you're trying to get somebody, then he's twice before you, and that's the way. So we probably will never.
Is this the worst problem of Czech society nowadays? What's actually the serious problem here?
The serious problem here is probably the lack of elites.
Leaders,
elites. Yeah. And that's the problem which happened during the years of the communism, because most of the elites were either killed by Germans,
Elite,
either
elite, I see.
elite, yeah, then killed by communists, and the rest emigrated, you know, within those 20 years. So this is it, and this is. So how can you work with a society which does not have elites, which does not have leaders, which lost the ideas, and so we are in pretty not good condition as the country. I would say we're pretty fucked, to be honest. When I look at the last presidential elections, but yes, there are countries which might be in worse condition. Let's look at Somalia. Maybe, well, I don't know.
Something like Somalia, some banana republic or...
Yes, well, whatever. So there are a few countries in this globe which are in a bit worse.
Freedom of
Rwanda.
speech, freedom of speech, freedom of media. Is it a problem in Czech?
No, I would not say so. No. It's not the problem of freedom of speech. It's okay. We probably having some time a problem of how the medias are free in terms of the ownership of the medias, because the medias are owned by somebody. And then, of course, you must, or sooner or later, you realize that the owners might certain way trying to influence the. But it's not about the freedom of speech. I think it's pretty good.
What's exactly the problem with the owners of the media? They are not known, or they are not fair to the society?
They are known, but of course, if you look before elections, you simply can see that some of the owners are supporting a bit more. You know, not that massively. You know, nobody would try to make it like, wow, we for this one. But you see, you know, in certain ways, like, you know,
trying to make a way around
let's help them, or let's help them
without being so obvious. Again, it pops up in my mind.
And of course, even Czech TV, there is a big scandal that the Czech TV was not objective about certain cases. National TV, yeah. And now there is some jury which is supposed to find out if it's true or not. It's just in the recent
but society has its means to check that. You know, you say jury which will check. That won't happen in Bulgaria. I'm pretty sure about it.
Well, what about Somalia?
There is always worse. Sorry seems to be the hardest word for Bulgarian politicians. And I don't know here, but in Bulgaria, sorry, you know, honestly, from the heart, I'm sorry. You won't hear it in Bulgaria. Do you personally, as a Czech citizen, accept this Bulharsku se omlova, or you don't accept it?
For the 68?
Set, not from a politician,
okay,
set from
for the 68, yes, but I don't really think that that was Russian action. So saying for the Poland, East Germans and Bulgarians that they intervened Czech Republic in 68 is really not relevant, because if you look at it, that was the Russian forces, that was the Russian decision, which as excuse, because it was called the international help.
That was the...
and it was, of course, only blaming people that it was... it was not international, it was Russian invasion. And that's it. Nothing else. Nothing else. It's even uncomparable with, if you would try to compare it with like invention to Iraq. So it was international because Americans, there were Americans and Brits and a couple other nations.
Bulgaria was also allied with Americans.
Whatever. This was, in 68, it was purely Russian action, Russian invasion, showing that it's their property. And that was it. So I would say that it was nice kind of like funny way to say, okay, not all of us were there, but you know, in reality, that was army which had an order, and the army
more or less they had to...
the army belongs to Russia. So if whoever would say we won't go, he will be killed. So
same way. They most probably they would have been invaded also by Russians.
So there was no way, basically.
Why did you ask, is Bulgaria in European Union after you were informed that a few people were arrested for painting the...
Because I don't think it's correct. Like, well, if somebody would do that, if I would paint the tank pink again, I would definitely end up being persecuted. That's for sure. Well, whatever. That's because, you know, in that time it was really a time of, I would say, quite anarchy, and. Even the ownership was really not clear, you know, because when we painted, nobody really knows what to do because it has no owner. So they were sort of like, what can we do with it? But this doesn't belong to us.
Like a hot potato.
Yeah, like a hot potato. So that was kind of like a bizarre thing. But in these days, if I would do anything like that, okay. 2 years ago, there is a guy whose name is Roman Tic, and he was persecuted, and he actually ended in prison because he replaced the signs in the semaphores. You might have heard about that.
No,
that was a big case. Roman Tic. No, he replaced the lights, the symbols in the lights, in the traffic
red, green,
lights.
and yellow.
Yeah, he replaced that with kind of funny figures.
But kept the
colors. Kept the colors, but just replaced the shape.
Just for that, he ended up in prison.
He ended up in prison, but he ended up in prison because he refused to. They gave him a pretty big fine, which is absurd, because they said that he did it. He actually replaced and vandalized the lights. What was the truth was that he made the new glasses. On the original glass which he bought from somebody from the
same red, yellow, and green.
And it was only for the pedestrians, so it was not for the car. It was only the pedestrian signs.
And what was the picture he replaced with?
And he did kind of like a funny positions, like, you know, somebody, I don't know, yelling, nothing, playing guitar, something. That was, you would not even mention it. You know, and he replaced maybe like 15 traffic lights with that.
But did he endanger somebody with this?
Of course not.
Then, I mean, I can't.
But he ended up in prison because he got fined, and then he said he paid the fine, but they gave him enormously, like 150,000, not a fee. But he had to pay 150 for replacing it back. Because they said that he vandalized that, and the money. In the truth, what he did was he did not really change the lights by himself. He paid one of the guy who was working in the company.
I see, in the traffic light company.
So he basically underpaid him.
He didn't want to disclose that guy, probably, and then he took it on himself.
So he took it on himself.
That's correct.
So that was funny. Whatever. So he's supposed to pay that enormous, not
50,000 Czech crowns.
Czech crowns. And he refused to pay, under 50 or something like that. Yeah, 4,000 euros, something like that. Whatever. So he ended up.
For how long?
Like 1 month was there.
1 month, I see. That's not clear prison. That's a kind of like
correctional
institution.
Yeah, but it was prison. It was like he was really like in prison, so he has the
number.
Well, not number. He has the what is it called?
File. Yeah, the fingerprints and pictures.
Yeah. And of course it's in his
dossier.
I don't know.
CV.
Well, no, yeah, of course in CV, but record
police record. Yeah, I see.
So that's and it was clearly an art piece, which did not hurt anybody completely, and it was nice and funny and even with this, you know. So it really depends on, and I, as running an art institution, I'm in a certain way, you know, quite often facing a moment when somebody sprayed some stuff on our toilets and we have to repainting it every 3 days. So, you know, it really depends on, like, you have to respect probably the private property. And if you do not respect private property, it is a problem, and you sort of like getting back to the communism. Because communism, the main thing about the communism is that the communism never respect private property. So those are things which should be somehow distinguished, I would say.
Private versus state's property, probably.
Okay, well, something is state property, something is city properties, and so you know you go in municipality, so you're going lower and lower. I'm running the institution which is, I'm the head of the institution, but the actual building belongs to the city. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we have this moment like, okay.
Still, I can't get it together somehow. For example, tank, the T-34 or whatever it is, the pink tank.
And but you know, it's now kept in the military museum here in Prague, and
it's replaced from the place and moved to the museum.
But it's kept in pink.
In pink. Still, my point is, you say like property should be respected. Then your critics will say, okay, but why you did disrespect the state's property, this tank, or the
I explained it. You know, like 91, that was really anarchy. Nobody really known what that piece belongs to.
That means, if there is a danger of returning back to the communist style of running the country, you wouldn't do it nowadays.
If we would be heading back to the dictatorship, you can probably try to stop that.
You do it again.
Of course. Yes, if I don't want to, you know, but that's why I'm saying that it really depends on circumstances.
I see.
So that's the point.
Shall we stop?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that conversation. It was quite interesting for me to talk to you. And if that's possible, that we visit a friend of yours.
I'm going to call him.
Okay.
I'll stop the camera.